Hey, here we are live. Thanks for checking us out, guys. This is the Lightning Round podcast live on YouTube right now. We're currently streaming this on YouTube. You can catch it if you're listening to this podcast right now. You'll be able to catch it on the app later if you want to go see us do this thing live. But basically, due to some unforeseen circumstances, we couldn't get in the studio together. So this is the best case. I guess better than nothing, right?
Yeah, beats not having a show this week.
So this is what we have, and we're going to release this audio as a podcast later too. So again, apologize for the quality, but this is what we have to do this week. So, of course, the Chargers lose a heartbreaker again, this time to the Dolphins. And
you haven't saying that yet? Heartbreaker?
Yeah, it's only, what is it, two shows in a row. I'm already sick of it. Young Wei Koo, of course, on the end of this one as well. But let's go ahead before we get into all that mess. Let's go ahead and talk about some game plan adjustments, because last week we had kind of talked about some things we wanted to see and some things we saw in game one and some changes we wanted to have made. And one of them was to get Hunter Henry more involved. So last week, Antonio Gates trumped Henry. Gates had 38 snaps. Henry had 23. This week, Henry outsnapped Gates. Henry had 33. Gates had 32, pretty close to a 50-50 split. But Henry got more involved this week.
Yeah, good to see. They got him involved early. They got him involved in the kind of intermediate and deep passing game, kind of used him to control the middle of the field a little bit, and got him involved on the perimeter as well. He looked great. Miami basically couldn't cover him. He was getting open against linebackers and corners and safeties all day long. Looked fantastic, and Rivers did a good job of finding him in the passing game. Good to see a better disparity of snaps between Henry and Gates. And also, of course, you can't talk about the tight end play without giving Antonio Gates a big congratulations for breaking the touchdown record for tight ends. Great to see him, break that record, do it in a Chargers uniform. Would have been better if he had done it in Qualcomm, but it is what it is.
You couldn't let that go, could you?
No, I couldn't.
I was just hoping it would be about the record and we'd be done, but you had to bring that back. Of course, it would have been better in San Diego. But yeah, awesome to see the greatest tight end of all time break that record. And, obviously, as a Charger fan, you got to love Antonio Gates. And no matter, where you are in your fandom, whether you're a new fan or an old fan, everybody knows about Antonio Gates, and he broke that record.
Did he play basketball in college? I can't remember.
No idea.
No.
So, Henry, of course, caught all 7 of his targets. I think he had 80 yards on the day, second in the team in receiving yards. Gates targeted 4 times, 11 yards, and, of course, the touchdown for the all-time tight end touchdown record. So at least we're getting Henry more involved, and he is not just a blocker this week.
Huge game plan adjustment. They really made no effort to get him involved during the week 1 game, but they did a much better job of getting him involved this week. Really spread it around. Like I said, they took advantage of a Miami defense that was stacking the box to stop the run and threw over the top of them, and did a great job of getting Henry involved and really loosening the defense up with that element of the passing game. Yeah,
and another thing that we had kind of talked about last week was, and this is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum too, and a little, some credit to the Chargers. We had talked about how the snap split between Hayes Pullard and Corey Toomer were totally lopsided, and Toomer should have got a lot more snaps. Hayes Pullard had 32 last week. He had 42 this week. Toomer had 27 and 12 this week against the Dolphins. So Nigel Harris, of course, getting a couple more snaps too. I think 6 more snaps than last week. And Kyle Emanuel, like we mentioned, got scaled back, had 30 week 1 and I want to say 12 this week.
12,
So, and to be honest, and why I give credit to the Chargers, Hayes Pullard actually played pretty well. And while, we kind of were giving him, some shit about playing Hayes Pullard and being a Gus Bradley guy, and that was his guy and he wanted to bring him on, Hayes Pullard actually made his tackles. He had a solid game. Corey Toomer, again, kind of up and down. He had the turnover last week, but this week he was missing tackles a lot like last week. So Hayes Pullard got more snaps this week, and deservingly so.
Yeah, I agree. He earned the snaps this week. I think the difference really between Pullard and Toomer is the kind of downhill guy. He's more athletic. He's more instinctive. he covers more ground, so he tends to be in position to make plays and be kind of meet running backs in the hole. Whereas Pollard, he's chasing guys down, but he's usually chasing them downfield because he's not as instinctive, but he's not reading and reacting as quickly as Toomer is. But when he gets there, he makes a tackle. And you can't afford to have a guy in the middle of the defense missing tackles as much as Toomer has been in the first 2 weeks. Not sure what's going on with Toomer. Really expected more out of him when Perriman got hurt. I don't know if he's having confidence issues with them bringing Pollard on and just handing him the job, but he has not looked good in the first 2 weeks, and it's really hard to argue that he deserves more snaps based on the missed tackles. There have also been a couple plays where he was pulled out of position, kind of spying on running backs coming out of the backfield, and they threw behind him. There was a play last week against when Jeff Erman caught a big play on Kyle Emanuel, where Toomer was right in position and he would have knocked the pass down, but he kind of trailed off of his spot following, I think it was Jamal Charles, and they threw right behind him for a 20-yard gain. So not only is he missing tackles, but he's getting sucked out of position on passing plays and making other people vulnerable in the passing game. So, can't really argue with the decision they've made. I still don't think Pollard is a starting caliber NFL Mike, at least not on a championship caliber team or a playoff caliber team, but he's outperforming Corey Toomer, and you really can't say otherwise at this point.
Yeah, Pollard's always been a depth guy. And when he came in, we thought he was more of a depth guy, but they had to sign him because of Denzel Perryman. So right now, the depth having to play starter minutes and, of course, playing better than Corey Toomer. And we kind of agree on that. Another thing we had kind of talked about was Des King. He had 2 defensive snaps. I think he had 1 on special teams last week. This week, 56. Of course, having Jason Verrett injured kind of helped catapult him into the starting lineup, but much better this week, getting more snaps for Des King. He was second most with tackles for loss. He had 1.5, fourth on the team in tackles. So not only getting more snaps, but also being active and kind of keeping the ball rolling like he did in preseason.
Yeah, they played a lot more nickel against Miami than they did against Denver. It seemed like they were in nickel a lot more than they were in their base defense, which probably contributed to some, not all, but some of the issues with stopping the run, because it seemed like anytime Miami caught them in the nickel, they just ran it down their throat and they couldn't stop it because they were missing that extra body in the middle of the defense. But Dez had a fantastic game. He had 2 tackles for loss. I think he finished the game with 5 or 6 tackles and 56 snaps. Again, just seemed like he's all over the place, aggressive, instinctive, flying to the ball and making tackles, making plays. And it's something that was badly needed in that secondary with Jason Verrett being injured. So very nice. Good adjustment, first of all, playing more nickel, getting him on the field, and he responded with the increased snaps, and really, I doubt they regretted it. He played fantastic.
Yeah, he was good, and I think it ended up being 1.5 tackles for loss. I think they credited him and Melvin for a split tackle for a loss.
Oh, did they? I thought it was 2, but
oh, really? Yeah, but still being in on the play. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Dez, of course, earning those extra snaps, 56 this week, opposed to the 2 defensive snaps last week. Something else, I guess, and that, of course, I keep starting this off if you want to jump in and say something you want, but I think a big thing that we can kind of talk about here is the run game. I mean, we had talked last week that kind of Wiz's plan was okay. The run, pass was the way to win that game. It was probably the right way to go into that game, at least. This time around, it seemed like Miami was kind of selling out to stop the run. So then Wiz kind of started implementing that short passing game as kind of an extension of the run. A lot of those swing passes, quick slants, crossers, some dinks, some dunks, some just to get some extra yardage. And, Lynn even talked about how once they noticed that Miami was going to focus on stopping the run, that opened up the short passing game, and the Chargers just tried to take advantage.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of things. I think first, obviously, they realized that Miami was in zero coverage a lot, and they were, like you said, selling out to stop the run. So they had to make an adjustment there, and they did a good job of making an in-game adjustment instead of just running Gordon into a brick wall over and over and over again. I still think this team needs to get more physical, and they still need to run the ball more effectively. They're not going to win a lot of games running the ball 9 times for 13 yards with Gordon. So they've got to figure that out. The middle of the offensive line was brutal in the run game. They just got blown up left and right. They were missing tackles, got bullied, and never really responded, in my opinion. But the pass protection was there all day. Miami barely got around. I think they hit Rivers 3 times, sacked him once in 40 dropbacks. So they were very efficient, very effective in terms of protecting Rivers, and they just picked him apart. And I personally, I'd written an article on Friday, I think it was, talking about how they needed to incorporate more swing passes into the offensive game plan because they needed to get the ball to Gordon in space, especially with the running game not working. So I like the fact that they incorporated those swing passes, they incorporated the screens, and got Gordon rolling another way, even though the running game wasn't working.
Yeah, and credit to Lynn and Wiz for making an adjustment, not sticking with it. We thought Lynn would be a ground and pound, just shove it down your throat type of running team, but as you saw in game 2, it wasn't working. Dolphins were focusing in on stopping it, and so rather than keep going to it when it wasn't working, they at least went away from it and tried to take advantage of something that was working.
Yeah, I think obviously not being able to run the ball hurt them at the end of the game, though, because you might be able to build a lead passing the ball, but in the NFL, you don't normally win games passing the ball. You have to be able to bleed the clock. And when they get the ball, I think it was with about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they're unable to pick up a first down. At that point, bad things are about to happen. Of course, the ensuing punt is short. It's returned big. They wind up at the 50-yard line. No, that was earlier, wasn't it? The block punt, wasn't that earlier in the game?
No, I think that was like the second to last punt. But anyway.
Yeah. So the special teams issues, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute. But anyway, you can't move the ball. You're deep in your own territory. The punt comes up short. They wind up with a big return. They're up at the 50-yard line. And from there, it's a couple runs, and they're kicking a field goal. So got to be able to run the ball. They've got to get that straightened out. Something that I'm wondering if they might need to do. Lynn's running game is very diverse, and it's very multiple. It's also very complicated. It requires a lot of movement and athleticism from the offensive line. They've got to be able to get to their spot and execute their blocks, and right now they're not doing that. So I thought they did it pretty well in the first week. They didn't do it at all against Miami. I thought Slauson on several occasions had a hard time pulling. They were trying to run trap plays, and they were letting Sue come through the line, and Slauson wasn't getting there to block him, and he was blowing up running plays left and right. So they might need to simplify that rushing attack for the middle of that line. I'm just not sure that Slauson's capable of doing what they want him to do at left guard, and it seemed like Pulley and Wiggins also had a very rough game in the running game. So they might need to simplify things a little bit from a game plan standpoint, just to get guys moving forward and give them a chance to make a block. They might be asking a little bit too much of them against some of these really physical, fast, aggressive defensive fronts.
Yeah, I'm glad you said in the run game too, because I think in the pass game, you mentioned earlier, the offensive line held up pretty well. But in the run game, the AB gaps were exposed. Sue was taking over that game, it seemed like, at the line of scrimmage. Pulley was getting pushed back, Slauson, Wiggins. A lot of that interior offensive line was having some trouble getting some push. I will say Russell Okung played great on Sunday. We can talk about some guys that were good, but he was good all through preseason. I thought he was good against the Broncos, but I thought this was his best game as a Charger. And I posted a clip about it, but that 26-yard run by Brandon Oliver was all Russell Okung. He completely cleared out the left side of the line. He shoved Charles Harris wide so Oliver could cut inside. He got the next level, practically speared Kiko Alonso at the second level.
And
let Oliver get a big gainer. So I thought Okung had a very good game. For me, his best game, I mean, obviously 2 games in, but his best game as a Charger so far.
Yeah, he played very well. I actually thought, especially if you're looking at the passing game, I thought the tackles played pretty well. I mean, for not DeMarcus Ware, for Cameron Wake. For Cameron Wake to get in that game and not have a sack. I don't even think he had a quarterback hit, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't really think he showed up on the stat sheet as a pass rusher at all. So maybe a few hurries. But anyway, I thought the tackles played very well. And the interior of the line held up much better in pass protection than they did as run blockers. They did a very good job of giving Phillip one clean pocket after another. I thought early in the game, Phillip was a little frenetic in the pocket, not trusting the blocking. But I thought as they started to throw the ball a little bit more and he started to see the protection was there, he settled in and started making good decisions and was calm and very poised in the pocket, and that was as good as he's looked in the pocket in probably 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. I thought Rivers did well. I thought it was a pretty good game for him. He kind of limited his turnovers this week, and I don't know. It seems to me that this team. We said last week that obviously this isn't Mike McCoy's Chargers, but even though they're 0-2, there are still a lot of good takeaways from this team. And they lost to a Jay Cutler-led Dolphins team, so that's not
bad.
great.
That's bad.
That's a bad mark on Anthony Lynn's resume so far. But I haven't quite hit the panic button yet. I think when the Chargers started to be bad last year, it seemed like there was no way they were coming back from it. But this seems like minor mistakes that cost them games that they could end up winning later on if they were put in this situation again. So I'm not completely panicked. How are you feeling?
I think I'm not panicked. I'm not happy, but I'm not panicked because I think we're seeing adjustments that Mike McCoy never made. You talk about changing from the run heavy pound and ground to the short passing game to get the ball moving and get things flowing. Good adjustment. Not sure McCoy would have made that in the reverse position. I also thought we talked about the time management at the end of game one. I thought it was much better in game two. They had a very efficient drive to end the first half, even though they missed the field goal. They moved the ball down. They didn't waste any time. They were very crisp and efficient. They also did a very good job of moving the ball down at the end of the game. They did not waste any time. I think the timeout usage is questionable. I didn't like how quickly they used the second timeout, and I thought they used the third and final timeout way too early with 19 seconds on the clock, being that they obviously were not planning on kicking the ball with 19 seconds. I thought they could have let the clock run down a little bit or maybe run one more play and tried to get the ball in the end zone. Wasn't really even a fan of centering the ball. And there was some confusion after they did that about whether they were going to kick it right away or spike it. But I think in terms of how Phillip managed the huddle and Phillip managed the clock, I think you can see improvement in the time management from game one to game two. Much more efficient. The communication was better. A lot of that stuff was cleaned up in a short week. So I think that's encouraging. I think the personnel adjustments they made are encouraging. We talked about Dez. We talked about Hunter Henry. We haven't talked a whole lot about Emmanuel. You mentioned it, but he goes from 30 some odd snaps to 12. And they were basically just using him on first down for the most part, it seemed like. He wasn't on the field really at all on second and third down, unless they were asking him to rush the passer. A lot more nickel, which we asked for. Good changes. Something I'm not sure, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I noticed it. Darius Philon was on the field a lot. We saw a pretty stark drop-off in snaps for Corey Liuget from 49 last week to I think it was 32 this week. Philon went up. I think he had 20 snaps last week. He actually led the defensive tackles in snaps at 35, 33, something like that. Square also played a little bit more. So you're starting to see the disparity in snaps between Liuget and some of the guys who are performing behind him work themselves out. Saw a lot of Philon on first and second down. Saw more of Liuget on third down after he was really effective as a pass rusher. So I think they're working out some of their rotations and they're working out they're figuring out what their personnel looks like. Whereas I think they really used the first game to figure that out. So I just think they're making adjustments. They're being smart about it. You can see improvement in certain things that we talked about. So I'm not panicked. I want to see wins. But I think, like you mentioned, I think some of these close games are going to lead to wins here because they're learning from their mistakes, which Mike McCoy never did.
Right, yeah. So Emmanuel in first down playing in nickel. We had talked about, hey, if you can get him in on some some run downs, some early downs, it's a lot better than getting him on the field in third down and having to cover a wide receiver 15, 20 yards downfield. So Kyle Emmanuel actually didn't play so bad. Had a pretty good stop in the backfield, poked away a ball in coverage, which was good. And Darius Philon, of course. How can you not notice when Corey Liuget is not on the field? Though he had a better game than game one. Darius Philon had a very, very good game, very, very quietly good game. And the one thing that sticks out, I couldn't stop remembering this one play, was in the first quarter where he was scraping line of scrimmage. He shed his block, and tackled Jay Ajayi towards the sideline for a loss. It was just perfect technique, and the fact that he could go scrape the line, shed his block, and get in the backfield and tackle a guy like Ajayi who was making guys miss all game long was very good. I thought Darius Philon played really good. We haven't mentioned him in 2 weeks, but Jatavis Brown is an animal. He currently, right now, leads the league in tackles. He's all over the place. He has been a leader of this defense. And among this linebacking core that has some questions with Emmanuel and Pollard and Toomer struggling right now, and, Harris getting a little bit more snaps and Odawalu getting some special teams looks too, Jatavis Brown has been a constant in this linebacking core.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him because I wanted to mention him earlier when we were talking about defense and we kind of slipped right past him. But I think from a big picture standpoint, I think we can all agree the Chargers have found their weak side linebacker. If they're going to stick with this 4-3 defensive alignment, he is tailor-made for that position. He's eating it up, and you can just see him growing, it seems like, by the snap. He's coming downhill. He's meeting running backs in the hole, making plays in the backfield. He was pretty close to having an interception week 1. Ball just got by him. I think he was born to be a star in that weak side linebacker role. So I think you can plug him in as long as he stays healthy, and he's going to be productive and be a leader, and they're going to really love that pick moving forward.
Yeah, so I thought, also, we talked about Philon having a quiet game. I thought Trevor Williams had a pretty good game too. At the beginning of training camp, we had kind of talked about how it seemed like Trevon Reed would probably get that last corner spot, but as soon as training camp started going on, the coaches clearly trusted Trevor Williams, and deservingly so. He looked really good in Jason Verrett's absence. He showed good ball skills on that pass deflection, caused the incompletion. He gave up a pretty big completion where Cutler was like escaping the pocket, had all day, and dropped a ball over receiver's shoulders. But I thought he had tight coverage all game long, pretty good in the run game. I thought for his first starting role on the outside, I thought Trevor Williams did well.
He played really well. Like you mentioned, he had the one pass breakup. He was just sticky in coverage. Always seemed like he was right in Devontae Parker's hip pocket. And even the one big play they completed, it was a broken play. Yeah. And it basically took a perfect rainbow throw right over Parker's shoulder to complete it. Trevor was right there. I think he's going to play a lot with Verrett hurt. And I think he's earning those snaps because he looked very good against a pretty good receiving core. So good on him. He showed up in a big way.
Yeah, we're just sticking on defense. I thought Lynn said something interesting today that the defense has been a very bend but don't break the first 2 games, and he said at some point we just need to get a stop. And it seems like Lynn at least gets it. Game 1 to game 2, he's making those adjustments. Come next week when they play the Chiefs, we got a lot to clean up. But he at least gets that. Look, kicking field goals is great, but we're 0-2. There's no results here. So this defense has got to come up with a stop now, So I think putting Gus on notice a little bit, he didn't say Gus Bradley's got to step his game up, but saying, we've had a bend but break defense, but we got to come up with a stop is obviously, referring to Gus Bradley's defense and at least putting him on notice a little bit that, hey, we got to get a stop. We got to, next week there's a dynamic offense. And if Jay Ajayi is going to get 122 yards on the ground, Kareem Hunt's another tough running back to bring down, and he looks like a star so far in the first 2 games.
Yeah, Hunt, that matchup with Hunt's a scary one right now because the Chargers are missing tackles left and right, and Hunt's greatest attribute as a running back is his ability to make people miss in tight quarters.
One of our favorites, one of our sleepers.
Yep.
Throw absolutely. That in there.
Yeah, he was a guy that we both liked quite a bit during draft prep. I don't know about you, I've been surprised by the breakaway speed. I didn't think he had the breakaway speed based on the college tape. But he definitely has that. And can you combine that with the vision, which is just, first class. The holes that he picks, the way he weaves through traffic, he sets guys up to miss, sets his blockers up. He runs at a very advanced level. And the way the Chargers are missing tackles right now, that's a pretty scary thing. He's coming to town this week. So they've got to get those tackles cleaned up quick.
Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I just want to talk about – I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I want to talk about kind of the end of the game, those final 19 seconds where it seemed like there was so much upheaval and so much confusion about what was going on. My initial take, I thought it seemed to me like Rivers wanted to run another play. Going back to watch it, he obviously wanted to spike the ball for Koo. He was trying to kill the clock. But the fact that, he's out there trying to get his guys lined up. Lynn's on the sideline sending the kicker out. Rivers is sending the kicker back. There was just a lot of confusion and a lot of miscommunication. It just seemed like nobody really knew what was going on. And I think Lynn addressed it during the press conference today. He said that the special teams coordinator is the one guy that doesn't have a headset, and Lynn just didn't tell him that they wanted to kill the clock, so he sent the kicker out. But thank God Adam Gase called the timeout with 10 seconds left, because with all the confusion going on and Rivers and Lynn staring each other down on the sideline, I was really concerned the clock was going to run out. So while the time management was pretty good leading up to that point, they all have to be on the same page about what they're doing after centering the ball with 19 seconds and no timeouts, because they wasted a lot of time and the Dolphins bailed them out. Yeah,
they did. I think ultimately maybe Rivers does get that spike down, but who even knows? But
he had them wind up. He had them wind up. Yeah.
But Lynn, again, not like McCoy, admits his mistake. He tells everybody, "Hey, we're going to center the ball, and we're going to spike it and bring special teams out." Forgets to tell his special teams coordinator that, "Hey, we're going to center the ball, spike it, and let Koo come out." So once he centered it, of course, the holder and Koo, I think Kaiser's the holder, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kaiser and Koo are running on the field, and then Rivers saying, "No, go back, go back, go back." And right away, you can tell. Rewatching that kick, of course, over and over, and seeing Lynn's reaction on the side, kind of right before that play, where he's like, "Oh," he immediately knew. I forgot to tell. I didn't tell the special teams coordinator. How did I not do that? Mm-hmm. And at least admitting his mistake, and he's got to relay that to him. So it's not so much on the team. There was a miscommunication, but that's all on Lynn. And he took his lumps today during the presser and admitted that, "Hey, I didn't tell him."
Yeah, that's got to get cleaned up. But I think overall the improvement in the time management's encouraging, because it was a mess week 1 and it was much better before half and before the end of the game this week. So I was impressed that they made that adjustment as quickly as they did on a short week. So that's an encouraging sign. There's something else I want to talk about, but now I'm forgetting what it was.
I'll give a quick shout out while you're thinking about it. Jaleel Adai, I think, had a pretty solid game too. We were mentioning a bunch of players that had good games. I think he had made 22 tackles in the backfield. Got his hand on a pass. Made a really nice low hit on Devontae Parker on the sideline before half.
That was the best hit of his career. Best and cleanest and safest.
Yeah, safest, in control. He knew what he was doing.
Yep.
It was direct, and so I thought Adai had a pretty good game too.
Yeah, he played pretty well. I did not think David Boston. I knew I was going to do that. I didn't think Trey Boston had a very good game. Going back and rewatching that 29-yard touchdown pass to Stills a few times, Boston had deep responsibilities there, and he got sucked in on an underneath crossing route and just let Stills run right by him. So I think Boston's got to be there to help out the linebacker, Brown, on that play. You can't expect Brown to run that far down the field
on a guy like Stills.
Yeah, it's just not fair to ask him to do that.
Yeah,
so and some adjustments there.
And a dumb penalty, that unsportsmanlike conduct right in front of a referee. And right up to that point, the Chargers had 2 20-plus plays. The long run by Oliver, and then that seam pass to Keenan Allen for over 20, and the Dolphins had none up to that point. So there was no big plays happening. And of course, Boston hits the guy in the head. I don't remember who it was. Hits him in the head right in front of a referee, throws a flag, and you're essentially giving him a big play.
Yep.
And just a dumb move.
Yeah, just boneheaded. Just can't have it, especially from a guy who's been in the league for 3 or 4 years. Just can't be doing that kind of stuff. I remember what I wanted to mention.
Yep.
Going back to timeout usage, I mentioned I didn't like how they used the second and third timeouts. Also, not really a fan of using the first timeout to ice the kicker in the third or fourth quarter, whenever it was, in the middle of the game. It just seems like maybe Lynn loses track of his timeouts a little bit. I'm not sure if maybe he went into that last drive thinking he had 3 timeouts, because they used that first timeout right after the first play. Didn't really think there was a reason to do that. So got to be more aware of how many timeouts you have and how you're using them, because really, ideally, you don't want to be without timeouts, downing the ball or centering the ball between the hashes with 19 seconds left.
So I get, we've kind of touched on everything except the elephant in the room here. The young Wei Koo in the room, missing that kick, missed 2 out of 3. I think last week you can't fault Koo for the block kick. That was on Dan Feeney. We talked about it on the podcast last week. But man, the 2 misses this week were completely on him.
Yeah. If it was me, I would have brought in a kicking competition. Not saying I necessarily would have cut him, but I would have at least given him a wake-up call of, hey, you're not guaranteed to stay here if you don't start making some kicks.
Are you talking about this week? Are you talking about right now? Oh.
Yeah. Because he missed 2 kicks inside of 40 or inside of 50 yards at home. Just can't have it. Just can't be happening. So, I don't think you can bury your head in the sand and say this isn't a problem, because after the way things ended in week 1, now it's kind of repeating itself in week 2, even though it wasn't his fault week 1, but you're having special teams mishaps at the end of the game again. I just think you got to at least admit that there's a problem and at least start looking into addressing it if he's not going to start making kicks, because this is something that could start getting in his head real fast. And you got to start worrying about his confidence moving forward and how he's handling pressure. And I don't know if this is true because I didn't see it myself, but I heard he was vomiting on the sideline before that last kick.
Really?
So, yep.
Man, where did you hear that?
I heard it from somebody that was at the game. I don't remember who it was.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
But that's what I heard, was that he was vomiting on the sideline before the kick. So maybe already the pressure getting to him and he's not handling it very well. Not a real good sign 2 games into his career. And this is a guy who, we mentioned it, really didn't kick at all in the preseason. They basically brought him on. They decided to keep him because he made his kicks in practice. They had no idea how he would respond to game kicks, game situations, pressure situations. So, it's coming back to haunt them, and it's something they're going to have to be very aware of. And it might be something they have to address sooner rather than later, because they can't afford to have a kicker that can't make 43-yard kicks.
Surprising that a kicker from Georgia Southern isn't used to the pressure of a
shocker, right?
A big time game, big time kick.
I can't imagine why that would be. Maybe he should start doing backflips when he kicks the ball.
At least the Chargers have that. They have a cool video of him backflipping a kick. Just tough. I don't think you can. I think obviously psychology has a lot to do with it, and you mentioned it. That's half the battle with a kicker. So if he starts missing some more kicks, it's going to be real downhill for him on his kicks coming up. But also, bringing in a kicking competition makes a ton of sense. I don't know why you don't just say, hey, look, Josh Lambo's on the market. We almost had him. Why not come in here and bring out some of the best in Koo and make him earn that spot, maybe? I don't know. But also, I'm not ready to completely throw in the towel on Koo either. I mean, if you can't fault him for game 1, he had 1 bad game, missed 2 kicks. Sometimes kickers have bad games. He's a rookie kicker. You kind of expect some of these mistakes early on, and you hope it doesn't happen. But, I don't think you can completely give up on Koo quite yet. But obviously, the leash could not be any shorter.
Yeah, very short leash. Like I said, I'm not ready to necessarily cut him and replace him right now. Mm-hmm. But I think at least having some competition and letting him know that, hey, you got to start making your kicks or we're going to replace you. I think there's some merit to that. Kind of giving him a wake-up call that he's not necessarily secure based on a YouTube video. He's got to start producing. Okay,
well, speaking of YouTube, we're broadcasting here live on YouTube. Is there anything else you want to say? We got some people watching us now. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Yeah, big shout out for Sean McGrath making the big 12-yard catch. It was the anniversary of his 12-yard catch against the Dolphins last year. Just a huge move for him. Totally deserves that roster spot. I take everything I ever said about him back.
Good. I was going to bring you to the mat here and say, look, McGrath got his 1 reception in, first down. Had early on he had more catches than Henry, which was concerning. But hey, look. That little crosser across the field, got behind a linebacker, easy first down. I don't know why they don't run that more often.
Funny, man. He's slippery. Can't cover him.
Hey, guys. Well, for those of you that are watching this, thank you. We appreciate you guys watching it. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll release this as a podcast as well. Jamie, first time ever after 100+ shows, at least one of us is in the studio. Both of us at our houses. We're just broadcasting live. It feels a little different, but I think it still worked.
No, it's not the first time. We did one from Idaho when I was on vacation and one from Minnesota last year.
Right, but I was in the studio.
Oh, that's right.
So at least one of us was in the studio. Yeah, but
little different.
Yeah.
Kind of looking like we weren't going to be able to record this week. I'm glad we were able to figure it out.
Yeah. So thanks for sticking with us, guys. We'll be back in the studio next week, and everything will be back to normal. Jamie is on Twitter. Where are you at, Jamie?
At lightning_round.
I'm at Garrett Sisti. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.